Lead techniques, bending. I'm going to show you a few examples that you might not have come upon before. I know that you have done bending before in the past, but these are some different techniques that you can use with bending. If you do know some of these techniques already, use it as a review. If not, it will help you spice up your leads a little bit more. So let's get rocking with it. Here we go. The first one is a half step bend. Now most bends that you do are full step bends, which is a 2-fret bend. Remember the exercise I showed you where you go 2 frets higher than the note you're bending. You can check your bends. But a half step bend is also used quite frequently in lead playing. And I'm going to show you some examples of where it could be used. So a half step bend is basically you're bending to the note 1 fret higher. Now one good way of using a half step bend is to hit the blues tritone. Remember that blues tritone we learned in the blues scales? That's a good way of using it. Or you could do it to go up to a note, like say I do a note that's not in the scale. Say I bend the 2nd fret. So I'm bending up to this note. Another way of using it is to lead to another note, sort of make it like chromatically. Suppose I was going from the 8 on the 2nd string to the 5 on the 1st string. I could go. So it's sort of, you sort of hear that 3 note, but it slides it up to it sort of because you're bending it. You hear all 3 of those pitches in there as you play that. All right, the next bend is going to be the ghost bend. And I call it the ghost bend because you don't actually hear the bend going up. You just hear the release of it. So it's sort of, it's invisible. That's why I call it the ghost. And you hear it at the end. So what I do, so let's take the 7th fret of the 3rd string again. Bend it up before you pick it. So you just hear the release or the downward part of the bend. Now, I also, this is just a little funny thing, I had some students try to create their own bends and bend techniques at one point. And one student did come back with a ghost bend, but it wasn't that one. It was one that sounded like a ghost, and it was pretty cool. Let me show you the way this works as just a little added example. See, I go to the 8th fret of the 2nd string. You know, it sounds like... So you could be creative on your own and try to make up your own bends as well. That's just a funny one, and but it could have an application somewhere. You never know, and maybe a Halloween song. So anyway, that's a ghost bend, and you could play the ghost bend, the one I showed you originally, on other notes too, like say the 2nd string. All right, the 3rd example is a double pump bend, and that's going to bend up, down, and then back up again. So say we're on the 3rd string, 7th fret again. So you hear the up, down, up motion of the bend. Say I was on the 2nd string, 8th fret. All right, so that's the double pump bend. All right, the last example is a scream bend. And these are 2-note bends, and you're going to pick 2 notes, but only bend 1 in each of these examples. The first one's going to be 8 on the 2nd string, and then 7 on the 3rd string. I want 3 fingers on the 3rd string, and the pinky on the 2nd string. The pinky's going to stay stationary while the 3rd string bends up with the 3 fingers. So I could be using this, let me show you, this is in the key of A. If I was doing a riff. Has a lot of cool applications that you can use that as well. I'm sure you probably have heard that in some leads before. Another screen bend we could do is on the first two strings. Let's say the 8 on the first string, 8 on the second string with the 3 fingers on the second string, bending only the second string. First string stays stationary. All right, so that's some creative bending techniques. Always experiment, try your own different ways of changing them around, or your own variations of each of these. Try to create your own bends as well. All right, get to work.